This is the Wait Just an Infosec podcast, your weekly opportunity to tap into the minds of some of the world's foremost cybersecurity experts. Wait Just an Infosec is a weekly show live streamed on SANS Institute social media channels on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The show features a wide range of guests from across the InfoSec community. Whether we're diving into the weeds of the latest data breach or exploring the security implications of groundbreaking technology such as generative AI, each episode brings you new insight to keep you engaged in the industry, feed your fire for knowledge, and amplify your value as an InfoSec practitioner. Join the SANS community and gain free access to cutting-edge industry news, cybersecurity resources like technical research, and tools that can't be found elsewhere. Subscribe for free today at sans.org/join.
On this week's episode of Wait Just an Infosec, SANS contributors Stacy Dunn and Rich Greene discuss their personal journeys into cybersecurity and the importance of skill versus background. They answer a lot of questions from the live stream audience, including, should employers dare to invest in potential over pedigree? Why did you choose cybersecurity? What was your profession before diving into cybersecurity? Then Ashish, Rajan, and Roddie talk about the SANS 2023 Cloud Security Exchange, which will bring together Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and AWS on the same virtual stage for the first time. And now here's your guest host, Thomas Wolfe.
I'm eager to bring on two really favorite people of mine, Rich Greene and Stacy Dunn. They are going to be talking about cybersecurity, how they got into cybersecurity, and just a little bit more about the weird ways people get into cybersecurity. It's not usually just a straight path. It's very circuitous. I know my path was, I started out doing construction. So it's who knows? It's anybody's game. So let me hand it over to Rich and Stacy. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so happy to see, as Thomas mentioned, this global audience. I'll introduce myself and then I'll allow Rich to introduce himself as well. As Thomas had said, we are both senior solutions engineers here at SANS. And the interesting thing is we have very different backgrounds, which we're going to be talking about a little bit today. Rich, go ahead.
Thank you, Stacy. Again, thank you, Thomas, and thank you to everybody that's joining us today. This is absolutely phenomenal to see where everybody's from. As I said, as Stacy said, I am one of the solutions engineers for SANS. I came from a really weird background, which I greatly look forward to talking to everybody about, kind of showing that there's not just one way to enter this field, and you will definitely see that with the combination of Stacy and I today.
Oh, absolutely. So, Rich, let me ask you a question. What drew you to cybersecurity?
What drew me to cybersecurity? It's a good one. I think for me, honestly, Stacy, the thing that was most enticing about cybersecurity is I'm a problem solver. I followed that path through the military and being presented with an opportunity or a problem set and then having to find a way to achieve that or succeed. And I think cybersecurity is another phenomenal way of doing that, where you have a problem set or you have something that you're trying to achieve, and now you utilize all these tools behind you to kind of facilitate that. That was my thing, is this having a problem solving. What about you?
Yeah, so what draws me, or rather paints me, a lot of people don't know, and maybe you do, I have a degree in fine art. So I am a career transitioner. I did not start out in cybersecurity. I didn't always know that that would be the thing that I would be doing, but here I am. I had originally, I was working in retail for the longest time at a very large gaming store. And, one day I was kind of fed up with it and I was inspired. We had a network engineer come in and I kind of looked at that person and said, I want to be that guy someday. That's what I want to do. He looks like he's just having the time of his life. Because he had come in, and this sounds silly, but bear with me. He had come in, he was wearing like sweats and socks with sandals and this like just tank top. And I'm like, that to me was the epitome of cool. And it's not silly. It really does. I get it. But that's what, led me to that direction. And then I had a very supportive partner, at that time. Again, I'd had my degree in fine arts, and I had that moment of like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What do I want to do with my life? And then my partner said, no, you'd be really good at this. You should go ahead and try. And, I went into it. I ended up working at a bank as a teller, and then went into help desk, and then security, and moved on to a vendor, and things just kept happening. And so, Rich, would you also say that you're a career transitioner, or did you always have your eyes set on being in security?
Oh man. So I will say, I know a lot of people out here, and I'll get made fun of a lot for it, but I know a lot of us here saw Hackers, that phenomenal movie growing up, or Sneakers, right? Those two very classic movies that really, spanned the definition of what it was to be a hacker. I need to hack the Gibson, need to get the mainframe. So no, I actually started younger on the wrong side of the fence. I remember being really young, and I got I think it was Backtrack 3, I think was the very first, cybersecurity operating system that I had finally installed. I didn't know how to use it, didn't know what I was doing, but I definitely knew I was the coolest person on the nut block because I had Backtrack on a machine.
You're calling Cali Backtrack by its OG name. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So, and that's where I started. So a lot of mine was doing the wrong things because I didn't quite know I knew what was wrong, but I still wanted to play right. I was inquisitive. I wanted to learn. So a lot of that was on that. From that, I joined the Army because I knew I didn't have a career as a cyber criminal for long. So I joined the military. I went a very non-traditional route. I went special operations. And then, so like you said, your first experience was, seeing that person in sweats, kind of having that insight on that part. Mine was operational cyber, like in the battlefield, and like seeing that transpire. I'm like, that is awesome. Like, we are taking a real world problem set and using cyber or using computers to facilitate that. Now that is awesome. Like, how do I do that? So then I came back, and then I found out about a course in the military called Brighton, which is a phenomenal course that really kind of shows you, network exploitation, wireless reconnaissance, a lot of the ground root type of things that you'll learn, a lot of, especially in the SANS courses, but on the operational side. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I got my position into this. So I didn't go to school for comp sci or, computer engineering. I didn't have all these certs when I started. Mine was really grassroots on the ground, just kind of to learn how to make things work.
Yeah. And then I want to see a +1 from anyone in the audience that still loves Hackers, still loves Sneakers. We have those on Laserdisc here. I kid you not. So +1s in here. And one of the things that I did want to address, we have some really great comments coming in. One of them is skills versus experience. But what about attitude? What about attitude? That is a really good question, because as we all know, whenever we come from these diverse backgrounds, there are a lot of different things that hiring managers can base their, who they hire upon, right? And in my opinion, I think that one about attitude and aptitude is a huge one. Within my story, it's kind of like Rich's a little bit, in the sense that, when I did start out when I was a little bit younger, of course, whenever the internet was a bit more, it still is this way, but it was a bit easier to exploit. It was a bit more vulnerable. It was before there were more, security products out there, even on the consumer level. I'm sure there were a lot of us that were getting into things that we shouldn't, being able to find things that we shouldn't. And I had my fair share of that too, in some of my earlier days. But, it's a matter of, as you had mentioned, kind of that puzzle or that troubleshooting and puzzle solving aptitude that people show. And what's your opinion here about that, Rich? And I want to hear that from the audience too. How do you all also feel about the attitude and aptitude pieces of this?
I think it's a huge part. And the same thing that I had mentioned and replied when we were going through the intro for this particular episode was, and I know it'll come up, and people hear about ATS, and if you're not familiar, it's the applicant tracking system, which is so many people need jobs. Everybody's applying for resumes, and they're sending those resumes in, and there's a system that's going through and checking it. And one thing that I think that is hurting potentially is the fact that that machine or that ATS isn't able to capture or qualify attitudes. It's looking at black and white on a piece of paper. And I agree. I think attitude should be a huge proponency because me personally, if I'm in a position to hire somebody, I need a holistic whole picture of somebody. Certs are great. Background is great. But do you have the passion to do the job? Are you just looking for a job because you just need money? Do you want to excel in this field? I think that's a huge part that you can't really get from a machine trying to look at a resume saying, you know what, hey, Rich Greene has all these things, but then Rich Greene's comes in the office and he's a horrible culture fit. He has a horrible attitude. That's something a computer really can't account for.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting thing too, because whenever it does come to that attitude component, as you're saying, that's not something that a machine can pick up on. And we have more and more processes that are becoming automated in the wrong ways, right? So whenever we get these applicants coming in at all these different organizations, and even whenever I was applying, prior to where I'm at now, it was like, please, oh, please, if someone would just talk to me, like they would just know who I am and what I can do and the attitude that I have. So has anyone else in the audience experienced this? I know the job market is a little rough right now. It's difficult to get that call back. Just wanted to get a gauge on, what people are seeing out there. If you are a job seeker, what is it like? Are you having a hard time? You can put your comments in there and we can even have some follow-ups. Go ahead, Rich.
No, I kind of what you were saying. And we had a comment from, I'm going to slaughter this name, but Kadia Qureshi said, how do you work around when asked for years of experience in cybersecurity roles or cyber entry roles? I apologize. And that's a tough one because it's one of those chicken or eggs. I need experience, but I can't get a job to get experience. So it's kind of an ever revolving circle. I know for me, honestly, the best way to get around that is to do a lot of stuff on your side, right? Look at what's going on. You can do a lot of GitHub repositories, do a lot of projects. There's a lot of things that you can do on your own and document, writing reports, putting up labs. If you're trying to get into like a SOC analyst role, you can kind of do that on your own. And then you can show that. So when they're saying, I don't have any work experience because I'm just getting into the field, but here's my entire portfolio of all these amazing projects that I've done that kind of show you do have a passion to do this. Because if you're taking it on your own to work on this, that's showing somebody that you want to do this field or you want to get into this field.
Absolutely. And something I'll add to that too, the thing that I tell people, especially whenever they start out, is whenever someone starts in cybersecurity or they're trying to get into that first entry level position, they're trying to get that hook in. One of the things that I often recommend is to treat your other experience that you have kind of like a variable. Because, for example, even though I worked in retail management for a long time, that led to me being able to troubleshoot and de-escalate and being able to have partnerships with the customers. And I did have to do a lot of different types of tech support and I had to fix consoles. So all of that stuff does kind of mesh together. So whatever you've done in the past, you can kind of transition it and make it into something that'll work for whatever future role that you're trying to get. And speaking of which, there were a couple of other questions that we did want to address or comments here. I do see one about war games to get their way into hacking. And it's great that we have so many people that were so inspired by these earlier movies. Also, shout out to any fans of Mr. Robot, because talking about all of these different, cybersecurity or hacking movies, it's so funny, perception versus reality of what actually happens and how that job goes, right? So it's like, are we always like clickety clack, I'm in? Like sometimes, but not very often. And Rich, as far as where we're at now, is where you're at where you want to be? And I want to ask this question. Any question I asked to Rich, by the way, I can also ask to the audience because we like to hear all of those comments and feedback. I know for me, I'm happy where I am at. I enjoy being a solutions engineer. But what about you? Is this where you want to be? Do you have any sights on anything else?
I do, but I think it kind of honestly rolls into our question of the week. If we want to get that going, is what really has brought you into cybersecurity? What draws you here? If you head over to Slido.com with that number, please hop on there really quick, fill it out. And that kind of ties into what Stacy just asked. Like, what brought you here? What do you aspire to do? What drew you to cybersecurity? For myself, it was really kind of that problem set of figuring out ways to solve, hence a solutions engineer. It was my easy way into the field. Dad jokes now. And then we want to see kind of what brought you all in as well.
Yeah. I think for me, it's very similar. Whenever it came down to it, and I was asked, what do you want to do? Now that I was in this world of tech and I was in help desk, I kind of said for my own purposes, like years ago, I'm like, well, I want to work in cybersecurity. One, it sounds really cool. And two, it seems to have the type of problem sets and the type of governance and control I could have over something, and not in a way that's like limiting, but in a way that's like provisionary. I could, see everything. I could see the bigger picture. I could, again, it's kind of like going back to painting, like what draws you in, artistic sort of capabilities. It is something that I feel has an art to it, right? It does have a lot of different human elements too, as we were kind of hearkening to when we were talking about these automated processes, right? It's this very people-centric thing, and it's about safeguarding not only resources, but also people. And I think that a lot of people might agree with me on that. It is a job that you feel good doing too.
I'm loving these questions or these responses that are coming in, honestly. The cool hoodie.
Cool hoodie, yes.
Who doesn't want to be in the dark room with the lights with the hoodie on? No, absolutely.
That's my favorite. Yeah, these are great. A desire to be challenged and help others. Absolutely. A lot of great comments coming in, a lot of great people's pathways, shedding light on issues that need to be brought up. These are all really fantastic.
Future career. Absolutely. And I know there's been a lot of comments of people asking Stacy and I kind of, what do we do now? We had somebody that was they have their master's. If we don't get a chance to answer your comment or your question now, please do not hesitate to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn or Twitter if you have it. Whatever gives you the avenue to us to answer your questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would love to help as many people as possible. There was another question, I believe it was, and this, Stacy, you and I had this conversation a lot, and I would love to hear your input on it. Soft skills or hard skills? Which one is more relevant for a cybersec professional?
Ooh, so maybe all of you can tell what my answer is going to be. I'm just going to say it. I think soft skills, because those, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, those are things that are either very difficult to teach or you cannot teach. Whereas I feel that a lot of the more technical capabilities are things that someone can more easily or readily learn because there's a guidebook to that, right? It's usually pretty direct and straightforward. Whereas we talked about earlier with that question of attitude, when it comes to attitude, when it comes to how someone communicates, those things are harder to get around and to teach. And if someone has both sides of that, I say big thumbs up from me.
I have to agree. I'm kind of right in the middle. I think it honestly depends on where you find yourself in your cybersecurity professional you're trying to go into. I feel if you are somebody that has a lot of interactions with managers or stakeholders or board members, you really need to make sure you have those soft skills, because you can be the smartest person in the room. And if you write your reports that way, it's going to get lost on the other end. So you really need to have that. On the other side, if you are somebody that is all inside the weeds and very deep and technical, you need to have those really hard skills. You need to be technically savvy. You need to have the chops to really get through. And then hopefully when you pass your report off to somebody else, they have the soft skills to kind of paint that message for you. But as Stacy said, if you have both, kind of a unicorn, and you should do great things.
Yeah. I want to point out and highlight a comment here that says, I'm a teacher trying to transition into cybersecurity. And again, my opinion, teacher would be a great one, because again, whenever you teach, you have to get not only big picture, you have to be strategic in how you have a lesson plan, right? But then there's that tactical component of being able to get into great detail about particular topics. And teachers are often very good at disseminating information in a way that all types of audiences can understand, right? So that is another really key quality, is to be able to explain things either on a technical level or to be able to pull back and to say something to where, if you're talking to, let's say, a board member and explaining something, that way they can understand it and you don't have to go through the jargon or get into the weeds, and to be able to present that type of information.
I love it. I know, I don't know if it was a starred comment, but I know we had another one. Somebody was talking about offensive operations. From my experience, the best advice I can give to somebody trying to go into that field is don't don't have the expectation of coming right in there and be like, I want to be a lead pen tester on the coolest team in the world. You have to understand where we're at, right? Don't be afraid to start at the ground level and honestly work your way up. I know we mentioned a lot and people are probably already tired of hearing that, but passion goes a long way. If you come in at the bottom and just prove yourself, have that passion to keep on going up through those ladders, you'll be a lead pen tester at some point. It'll be there. Offensive operations is a phenomenal sector to be into. It is so much fun. You notice there on our Slido that breaking stuff was high up there on that list. I mean, that is really a spot right there, right in the middle, breaking stuff.
Right
Exploitation is right below it, right? Everybody loves the excitement when it comes to offensive operations. You just have to understand, like, there's a lot of climb involved there. It's the same with every cybersecurity job. Honestly, don't be afraid of starting at the bottom and working your way up. It might not be the most glamorous, but if you go in there, you have passion, you do what's asked of you, and you're gonna go up in the ranks. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. And breaking stuff too. I at one of my previous roles, I had the nickname Chaos Monkey because I was really, really good at breaking things and then figuring out how to fix them. So I can also agree with that notion of breaking things is a very fun part of it, and can get you a long way, because I think that goes for a lot of different circumstances. If you mess up, it's fine. Like, all of us have messed up at some point, right? Like, again, give me a +1 if you've accidentally made like a production environment go down. I will raise my hand. I have done it because of a bad SQL command, but I was able to fix it. And that's the thing, right? Is to be able to find a fix for something, to be able to kind of work against the odds or figure something out, and having that tenacity to do so. And I like to ask you this too, Rich, as well as the audience. What aspect of your job do you like the most? I think that's one of mine.
My absolute favorite thing that I do right now is talk to people. Our job is a solutions engineer, and like, I always had the envision of being a SANS instructor, because I was an instructor prior to coming over to SANS, as this present role I have. But I still get to do the same thing. Is we have a customer on the side who wants to do something, and I get the privilege of helping them walk through that. I can sit down with them. I can kind of understand what they want, what are their pain points, and how do we make sure it goes away. And I absolutely love that. I spend a lot of my time just literally hours a day just talking to people, and then I get off and I spend even more hours on LinkedIn just talking to people on an individual level. I will always be a facilitator of trying to get people to achieve their dreams.
Yeah. Which, again, I'm going to swing my bat and do the home run of, like, again, this, even though we, have this synonymous sort of field with technology, I want to emphasize that at its core, like, even tech, like whether you're a developer or, an analyst or a systems engineer, whatever it might be, all of this has to do with people, right? We're using technology to make things easier, like, as a society, as, a larger community. So it's always about the people. And I agree. That's, aside from the whenever I'm alone and breaking things apart and listening to, like, my favorite music, the people part is what keeps me, coming back and keeps me happy from day to day, because ultimately that's, I think, what we all enjoy, or at least most of us. I can't speak for everyone, but I enjoy talking to customers and partners as well. It's, especially whenever everyone is in the similar field, because it seems like we have a lot of interest. Again, going back to, like, war games and sneakers and hackers and, video games and all of that. So. Absolutely.
I think the biggest thing for me is just don't be afraid to fail, especially in today's market. Go out there, submit your resume. You'll probably be told 100 times no. Mm-hmm. That 101st time might be a yes. Just don't be discouraged. Don't go away from it. Just keep on. The question will always come up: experience. We had something there. Somebody asked how exactly to quantify those home lab experiences on a resume. Honestly, you can put just projects and you just list all the GitHub projects you've done, mm-hmm. or list links to write-ups and reports that you've done. There are so many ways to get around the experience portion. You just got to be, in today's world, you just have to go think outside the box. Honestly, if you just can't keep on doing a traditional resume and hoping that it kind of sticks, you just have to go out there. So many amazing avenues and ways you can go around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking through some of the comments here. We have so many coming in. I'm so happy that this audience is engaged and excited. And there's just all different kinds of people here. This is fantastic.
Stacy, this will be a good one for you. From Vladimir, how do you both protect your own home networks?
Oh my God. I won't give away too much, but, even in one of the ones earlier, it was a mention of Shodan.io. Of course we have, anytime I bring it up. So we have an enterprise network here at home. So of course we have our own proxy, our own firewall. We have a lot of VMs that do different things. So if you could imagine what it might look like in maybe like an SMB or enterprise environment, that's kind of like the types of protections we have here. So that's what ours looks like. What about you, Rich? Do you have anything like that?
We've had this discussion a lot of times. Absolutely. So for me, I was like, well, how do I build an enterprise network? If I want to go in that route, if I want to be a network engineer, what do I do to do that? Mm-hmm. So I started buying enterprise level equipment and installing it in my single family home. We have an entire Ubiquity system. I think I have now 6 or 7 different access points with 7 or 8 segregated networks. We have to learn that. I want to know about VLANs. I want to know how to segment network traffic. I want to know about firewalls, both physical and virtual software. I'm sorry. So the best way to do that is just to dive in and then be like, oh, I have no internet right now. My family needs internet. I should probably learn how to build this system. So we did the same thing here, honestly. And as somebody mentioned earlier, once you build it up, well, how do you learn tools and techniques? Well, run Wireshark on your own network, do a packet capture, see what traffic's there, see what kind of stuff is going out and in, scan your own network, do ward driving around your area, just learn those skills. And it's a pretty easy way to kind of defend yourself and learn in the process.
And there are a lot of open source tools or open source security gateways and firewalls that people can use, like Snort or something like that. So that's an option as well. I think that one's one of the easier ones to use, kind of starting out, in my opinion. And I see another great question from Vladimir. You've got a lot of good ones, Vladimir. What is the biggest gap you see in the entry-level workforce? So for me, again, this is kind of like my perception or my opinion of it. When it comes to the entry-level workforce, I'm seeing organizations ask for a bit much. Like maybe these expectations for what entry-level looks like seems different from what I might expect, right? So when I see a position that says entry-level and then requires 5 or 8 years of experience and then a CISSP, it's like, okay, but that's not really entry-level now, is it? So that's kind of how I view that gap. I view it as there's kind of this gap of expectations. And I think that there are a lot of incredibly qualified people that, again, do show an aptitude, a passion, the capability. And I think that it's a matter of if a lot more of these organizations are to, look for these types of people, hire someone that has the passion and the willingness to learn and then train them up. That's my opinion. That's what I see as the gap.
I agree. Upskilling is definitely the way to go once you get in. And I think the hardest part, I don't know if it's really the gap in the entry right now. Stacy hit a lot of the good points, is that expectation. You shouldn't expect somebody to come in as a help desk with a CISP and 17 years of experience. This is not realistic. So I think the ATS is a problem we have right now when everything's automated. So it's just looking, do you have a CISP? And if you don't, you're automatically rejected, which doesn't make sense. I think the hurdle right now is just ground truth, getting out there and not really beating down the doors, but in theory, beating down the doors. It really is going to come down to just hammering it home. And I'm not saying you should probably challenge the hiring manager when they say, hey, this is what is required. But if you ask those questions, if you get that process in, maybe it's a positive for you. Maybe you're like, hey, I noticed that you're asking for this on an entry level. I don't have this. I have all of this stuff. Does this account for it? I mean, that is going to be the hard part. And I said, I don't know if it's a gap. It's just trying to figure out how to navigate through that minefield.
Yeah. Because I think, again, it's different from organization to organization. And it could be that it depends on who is writing that job description, right? It could be someone in HR. And I've seen a lot where the expectation is you have to wear a lot of hats. So to me, I'll see a lot of, job descriptions where it seems like it's 2, 3, or 4 jobs rolled into one. So I would say that's something to be cognizant of. That's something that does exist. And as Rich is saying, honestly, whenever it comes to a particular role, if you don't meet the criteria, apply anyway. The least you can do is try, and the least that they can do is say no. And again, it's a matter of, for me at least, whenever I'm applying at places, whenever I did, it's just getting that call. Sometimes that's what it takes, is to just have your shining personality get in front of someone. And that can be difficult to do, but it's a matter of trying, because you just have to get in there. You have to try and put your foot in the door.
Stacy, there was a comment that I saw in the live that we didn't have, that I really do. We have hit on the technical side of the house a whole lot, but we have been asked if we can kind of speak about non-technical roles, looking at GRC and auditing. From my perspective, those are just as important, if not more important, than the technical roles. Those GRC really dictates what the technical people can and are allowed to do and how they should do it. So that's another very valid route to get into cybersecurity, just in a different perspective. It takes a very good analytical mind to get into a GRC field, to have to dive and dig through all that information. There's phenomenal ways for that. SANSs have a lot of great courses. I don't really speak about the SANS courses, but there are courses that can really kind of align with getting into that field, which is, like you said, drastically different than a technical role.
I love talking about GRC. That's one of the areas, because, I mentioned it a little bit. One of the, the first role that I got into whenever I was getting into cybersecurity, I started as a teller at a bank, and then I went to the IT help desk. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. And then I got to be an information security analyst. So I was working for a CISO, which, as a lot of CISOs are going to be focused on the overall strategy, policies, cybersecurity leadership, and things like that. So GRC is kind of an underdog, I think, in the industry. It's not something that people immediately think about. We had a question earlier about pen testing, right? So that's what a lot of people, I think, they're like, oh, cybersecurity, I got to get into pen testing. But there's all of these different kinds of roles that I don't think people consider. There's even technical content writing. There's even things like learning and development. And I see someone here, it's Jacob, asked a question about data analysis and how to get into kind of that part of it whenever it comes to cybersecurity. And if we have any advice. What I can say is that's not a particular thing that I work in, but out of the types of roles that I have seen pertaining to data analysis and data science, one of the tips I might have, again, based on just a pattern of what I'm seeing out there, is a lot of those particular roles do require some level of being able to utilize Python to manipulate data, because that is a thing that it is very good at. And whenever you have that skill or capability, it makes those types of jobs infinitely easier.
Stacey, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
What would be your final greatest words of wisdom to everybody that has joined us now and will see this recording in the future when it comes to skills gaps and getting into cybersecurity?
Okay, that's a heavy one. First of all, make sure to stay hydrated. It's hot where I'm at. And then secondly, whenever it comes down to it, I think our biggest takeaway here is, this is going to sound like, I know you love Disney, Rich. It's going to sound like a Disney cliche thing, but believe in yourself, lean into your support system, and just kind of chisel away. It's about the long game. It's about trying to get to where you want to be. So be the tortoise, not the hare, I guess, is my infinite wisdom, if I have any.
No, I love it. I second absolutely everything you said. The only other thing I would possibly add is mentor. Network. Get on somewhere, network, find somebody. Like I said, reach out. I will take on as many mentees as humanly possible. and Stacy, I know, is there to help a lot of people as well. That would be the biggest one, is just ask questions.
Yeah. Thomas, your mouth is moving, but there are no words.
I will blame that on myself. Thank you guys for that great talk. It was really, really interesting. And thank you everyone for your participation. The audience was great. I was just lost in reading all of the comments and everything. Stacy, Rich, thanks again. You guys got to come back and do it with us again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. What a great conversation, everybody. It seems the vast majority of people that are with us now didn't start cybersecurity as their first thing. It just a path and it fell into their lap and came across as something that they wanted to do. And so we are getting ready to close up our news bites. Our Wait Just an Infosec live stream today. But before we do that, I wanted to touch again on the Cloud Security Exchange Summit that SANS is putting on. And we have Megan and Ashish to tell us a little bit more about that.
Hello, Wait Just an Infosec audience. Thank you for having us. I'm here today with Ashish. We wanted to talk to you a bit about cloud. We've got an exciting event coming up. But I just wanted to talk first about kind of some research I've been doing recently. So I've been looking into myths, missteps, issues that potentially occur with cloud migration. And so a big thing is a lot of people are moving to the cloud. They're not necessarily doing it the right way. And so I've been doing this research on when things go wrong, why are they going wrong? What are the issues people are facing going into the cloud? And what can you do to either divest from the cloud on the extreme if you decide the cloud's not for you, or preferably approach a cloud migration the right way? So I know, Ashish, you've been doing some research too on cloud that might help with this. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. But I was going to say, you left a teaser there for everyone. Why should they, or how should they go into cloud? Maybe we can talk about the good, bad, and ugly of the cloud as well. But I would probably say this. I think that in general, the angle with cloud has been the fact that if you do it right, it's safe for everyone to use, but not otherwise. I think I've been doing some research on the zero trust part for the white paper that we've been working on, which I think people who are attending security, the SANS Cloud Security Exchange, would get to download and see as well. The research has been primarily around the fact that zero trust as a conversation has sometimes been called a hype. Some people are calling it that it's been there for a long time. It's still being debated what's the real ROI for it. So the research that I ended up doing was more around the fact that, hey, okay, enough debating about this topic. Let's talk about how you implement this and what are some of the questions people come across when they try and implement zero trust. What is the ROI and how do you show this? But obviously, all of this is being built on cloud. And I would love to know the ugly side of cloud that you've been investigating on your side, Megan. So what are the top low-hanging fruits that you can share with people over here?
Yeah, so a lot of the issues, like I was just on a webcast recently with SANS talking about cloud migrations. I think the central theme that it came down to is how well do you plan your migration? A lot of people go into it not fully understanding the cloud. It's this, okay, well, I take this server that we have on-prem, and now it's in the cloud. And all of a sudden, you have things like costs you don't understand, egress costs, hidden costs of like resource bids being created. That does a lot. You have security issues of people misconfiguring things or ignoring configurations. A lot of times it's engineers and architects doing the migration and not considering the security implications, especially without that understanding. So I think the root cause that for any issue that you might face with the cloud, many of them come down to, did you properly understand the cloud, and did you plan accordingly for your specific organization? And I'd love to hear in the comments what issues our audience is facing, for sure. So drop those in the comments. But would you agree, Ashish, or have you seen other concerns I didn't mention?
I would definitely agree. I think I did a series called The Cloud Security Villains because I thought sometimes people just get too technical. So I ended up releasing something called The Cloud Security Villain, which was, I think, a research that I did with the cloud security community for what are some of the top 3 reasons. And Number one reason, what we found was to what you said, people went into it without an understanding of the cloud, and they misconfigured things, and that's what led to the whole breach thing as well. So, and I mean, I find that the two themes, if I was to kind of go back over the past 1 year, has just been the fact that cloud security as well as the misconfiguration. People know that, hey, misconfiguration happens, that's because of the breach and all of that. Then there is the other side of how do you do this well? So hopefully the white paper that you've done is actually going to highlight some few parts on it. I'm also keen to understand how the cloud has matured as well over time. I feel like, people like you and I who've been working in the cloud space for a long time, it feels like sometimes you kind of keep repeating the same migration piece. Do you find, like for me personally, I agree with 100% what you said. I also would add to the fact that most of the problems that people find in cloud are something that can be easily resolved, but the fact that we're not aware of how or what we are looking for is probably 9 or 10 times the reason why misconfigurations or people go down the path of, I want to do zero trust because there's so many misconfigurations. Actually, I don't think zero trust is going to solve that problem for you. But I mean, as much as you can read the paper that we've written, but the zero trust may not solve the problem for you if you're not planning for it, as Megan, you called out. So I definitely agree on it. I also would say, was there any hope for people? And I think in all of this conversation, if we talk about misconfiguration, is it manageable to have, or you can use zero trust as an example if you like. Do you feel zero trust can be solved? Oh, zero trust can solve the cloud security misconfiguration? People can comment on this as well if they agree.
Yeah, I think same thing you said, like zero trust is not a solution to everything. There's lots of pieces. And I like how you mentioned the cloud evolution, because one part of it is I do feel like the vendors are kind of understanding and learning organizations are having issues with. Where are those common misconfigurations? And one of the examples I use is when early in the AWS days, S3 buckets were public by default. And then you start getting all this news of these public data exposure because no one thought to set it to private. And now AWS by default sets it to private because they're like, okay, people are it's public when they don't want it to be. Let's start them secure. They can open it up if they realize that's the issue. So I think it's going to be on two parts. It's going to be partially on the vendor to be exposing these misconfigurations. There's lots of tools in the cloud, configuration tools to help guide you to potential security issues. Then it's on the organization to take a proactive approach. Again, if your organization isn't prioritizing security, then those misconfigurations won't be fixed. If they prioritize it, you're going to be able to fix them. And some challenges may be a bigger scope. It may require acquiring new solutions, architecting your network differently, but some things are just change your permissions on a bucket, on a storage account. So it's all about how the organization prioritizes it.
Do you reckon it's the same across all the three major public cloud providers?
I think like any organization, some are going to prioritize different things. So some clouds are going to provide more security features. Some are going to be more focused on performance, like Google Cloud is very big on their processing and their performance and things like that. So when looking for a vendor, that's one of the things you got to figure out is, are they going to support my needs from a security perspective, or what's my priority? Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons why you would choose one cloud out over the other. And yes, the security features, the architecture, all of that's going to differ. And that goes back to why it's such a challenge for organizations to migrate. A lot of times they're using their on-prem engineers and just saying, now you're doing this in the cloud. But even if they acquire someone who has experience in cloud, there's a much different situation having Google Cloud experience versus AWS versus Azure experience.
Oh, yes. I think the way I used to talk about this, or I think I still talk about this, is like, cloud is like driving a car, where if you're AWS, you may be right-hand driving. If you're on cloud or Google Cloud, you may left-hand drive. But you just happen to be in a country where it's on the same side of driving, if that's the right word to use for it. It's the same but different is how I explain it, that you may have the similar services, but then at the same time, it doesn't really work the same way. And you kind of mentioned the experienced cloud people as well. If there are people who are experienced in cloud and they're like, yeah, I get that part. I'm definitely agreeing with Megan. I think the migration part is important. Preparing ahead is important. And if they are thinking about what's next maturity for them, as in, I normally find that a lot of them have gone down the path of either going automation and trying to scale that out, or B, trying to be more zero trusty. But to what you called out, maybe shared responsibility is something to be called out as well, because I feel like migration, shared responsibility go hand in hand. But I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about that from SANS Cloud Security Exchange perspective. Any last word before we kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, I think the cool part of we're talking about these cloud differences is that for the first time at Cloud Security Exchange, we have managed to recruit AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure, along with you, me, and some other SANS Institute members to host the Cloud Security Exchange of 2023. So it's going to release with an ebook, and the only way to get that ebook is to register and attend the Cloud Security Exchange. And from there, you'll hear from all the cloud security providers, as well as SANS professionals. We'll talk on the research topics that you and me discussed we're working on currently. Yeah. And for anyone who wants to join, the link and details are below in the chat. Go ahead and grab those. And any last words from you, Ashish?
Like and subscribe.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for having us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the Wait Just an Infosec podcast. Remember to join us live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern for a new episode of Wait Just an Infosec. You can watch at sans.org/WJAI or go to the SANS LinkedIn or YouTube channels. The Wait Just an Infosec podcast will be released every Wednesday at noon. Thanks for listening. See you next week.